It was less than 1 week ago today that 114 million people turned on their television and watched a single sporting event. 114 million people. That's the entire population of Tokyo multiplied 8.5 times. One sporting event. Obviously, an important and prestigious event. That event, it was the American Football Championship, also known as the Super Bowl. And the person who coached the winning team in that Super Bowl is a gentleman named Bill Belichick. Now, in the National Football League, there's 32 teams, 32 head coaches. Of those 32 coaches, only 3 have won the Super Bowl. And of those 3, 2 have won it once. Bill Belichick has won it 5 times. Obviously, by anybody's definition, a great coach. Now, is that unique to America? Is that unique to American football? No. I'm sure you can think of your sport and your country, and you can think of who are the greatest coaches in that sport. Shlomo, in Israel, if I said to you the greatest basketball coaches, who would you give me as names? Yeah, David Blatt, obviously. Glenn, in North America, greatest golf coaches? Butch Harmon, yeah, I think that would be, most people would agree with that. Haley, how about in Ireland? Athletics coaches?
Don Kennedy.
All right, Don Kennedy, yeah. Tadashi, greatest coaches in Japan, who you got, buddy? Other than yourself, obviously, yes. Okay. Skiing coach, yes. Oh, swimming coach. Okay, swimming coach. Okay, good. You've also had some great ski coaches as well. Yeah. I think anybody would agree that in your sport there's greatness in coaching. And I would guess that every coach sitting in this room aspires to be a great coach. You want your athletes to be the one that wear those medals. You want your teams to be the one that hold those trophies. And those people who are coach educators, coach developers, don't you want to bring out the greatness in the coaches who come to benefit from your programs? I understand that because when I was first getting into this business as a coach, I wanted to be a great coach. But I soon learned I wasn't Bill Belichick. I wasn't very good at it. So what was the solution? I thought maybe if I go observe great coaches and talk to great coaches, I could understand what they do, how they think, what they believed. And that started a journey for me that's lasted over 30 years. And this afternoon, what I'm going to do is share with you some of the results of that research, plus some of the activities that I've been fortunate enough to gauge in. Now, none of this is magic. These are all things that you will be able to apply as a coach. If you adopt it today, it will likely make you a better coach tomorrow. If you're a coach educator, coach developer, the things that you can infuse in your program to help develop better coaches. So part of the journey, we often hear people think that there are great coaches are born. Other people believe great coaches are made. Now, as a researcher, until somebody gives you evidence, you don't really believe either of those perspectives. So one of the things we were interested in was personality. We wanted to know if you are born with a certain personality that will make you successful as a coach. So we surveyed or gave personality tests to several hundred coaches. And we also asked them, what's your win-loss record? And we tried to correlate a personality profile with success in coaching. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, we found no correlation. In other words, your personality will not dictate how good or poor you will be in coaching. We did find something rather surprising, though. When we took all of the data together, it was a little over 300 coaches, we found that there was a personality of coaching, and it differed from the average person. So most of you in this room, your personality profile isn't what we might call average. And so you might ask, how does it differ? Well, the first thing is, coaches tend to be more open-minded than the average person. Now that surprised us because many of the coaches we know are politically conservative and they hold traditional values. But what we found when we explored it a little bit more, it means they're open-minded because they're looking for new ideas. You can't be successful as a coach if you're using yesterday's principles and practices. That's why you're here today, to hopefully learn something new. And so that personality characteristic fits. The next, we found that they're conscientious. It's Saturday, folks. It's your day off. And you're here working. Right? You're here trying to learn more. And I'm guessing when you coach during season, you're constantly working harder. You're working more hours than most people do in their job as a coach. Conscientious. You want to get it right. You want to do it best for your athletes. You're extroverted. In other words, you like being with people. If you didn't, coaching isn't really a profession for you. The next characteristic I thought was interesting, it's agreeableness. In other words, how do you get along with people? We found that you're no different than most people. There's some people you like and you're agreeable to. There's other people you don't like, and so you're not so agreeable. And this was my favorite, neurotic. You folks are less neurotic than most people. Why? What that really means is you don't care as much about somebody else's opinion of you as you care about your own opinion. Kind of what Ralph was just saying about the quality of a coach's character. They set their own standards. Your standards for your own behavior and your own practice are generally higher than most people. And so if somebody criticizes you, you're open-minded, you're going to listen, but you're also not neurotic, so you're not going to really be crushed if their opinion they give you is not something that you agree with. Well, we didn't really find, as I said, that personality was a factor in successful coaches. It doesn't dictate the greatness in coaching. And so we started to look at other things to try to find out what happened. And one of the studies we did with tennis coaches, and then we also repeated it with golf instructors. And I'll tell you the results after I put you through a little exercise. You ready for this one? I want you to watch this slide and take a look at it. This is what we did, and you don't have to know anything about tennis to get this point. What we did is we showed these tennis instructors or coaches, 27 of them were expert coaches. In fact, 4 were Davis Cup captains. They had all been named Coach of the Year by the International Professional Tennis Registry. And then we also looked at a similar number of novice coaches. They were full-time tennis coaches, but they've been coaching less than 2 years. And we showed both groups the same slides, and this is one of them. We showed them the slides for only 15 seconds. Now, you've been looking at it for almost a minute. And then we shut it off, and we asked them to write down everything they remembered. What I'd like you to do, I won't ask you to write, but would you turn to the person next to you and tell them what you remember from the slide and see what they remembered? Go ahead. By the way, do we have any tennis coaches here? One. We've got one tennis coach. Okay. A little pressure on you. You interested in seeing what the experts and the novice coaches saw? Here it is. What's the difference? What do you see, Ralph? All right, you're definitely a novice. Okay, I'll give you that one. What else do you see? What's the difference? Come on, this is your data. You're the researcher. You got to analyze this stuff. Pelle, you notice any differences? The focus is very different, yes. Let me tell you the first thing I noticed, because I said we had them write this out, and I had a stack of the responses that they gave us. By the way, there was 12 slides in the deck, so it was quite a bit of data. And I was flipping through trying to sort between here's the expert, here's the novice, another novice, here's an expert. The first thing I noticed, and I was very surprised at, is the number of cues. Those are the little things inside the box. Those are cues, we call them. They were nearly identical between the experts and the novices. And I was surprised because we often hear experts see more than the rest of us. No, we repeated this study with golf coaches, and we found the same thing. Experts don't see more. It's exactly what you said, Pella. It's the focus. They see differently than novices do. And so we drilled down a little bit deeper to try to, because we asked them why they responded the way they did, to find out exactly what they were looking for. And we called these analytic skills. So experts have a higher level of analytic skill than novices do. So the greater coaches are very good at analyzing. And here's how they do it. All right, they focus on, as Pella said, the first thing is factors that will achieve results, outcomes. If you notice that tennis player, everything that the experts notice influenced the quality of the shot that player was going to hit. It was entirely focused on that technique. The second were things that were under the control of the athlete or the coach. Because if you can't control it, it's not important. You have to learn to live with it. For example, if you're a tennis coach and it starts to rain, you can't stop the rain, can you? But you can make adjustments and adaptations. You can change how you respond to the rain. And here's the final piece. Change. This is the question they were looking for. What can I change that's under my control that will impact results? And that's all they saw. They didn't see the buildings, they didn't see the uniforms, they didn't see the cars in the parking lot. They saw only the factors that they could control that, if changed, would impact results. Tight focus, just as you said, Pella. And if you, as a coach, can watch an athlete or watch a team and see those factors, that's the path to making good decisions that are going to help you be successful. So let's move into the next one, decision making. You've got this information, what do you do with it? Now, when we study decision making, we look at decisions as problems to be solved. For example, a coach has a practice coming up. That's a problem if you think of it this way. What can I do, or what do I need to do that at the end of this practice will most benefit my team or most benefit my athletes? Shape it as a problem. And we found that, again, we did this with novices and expert coaches. We found two kinds of decision makers. And I was having a hard time naming what it was. Now, does anybody in here read Sherlock Holmes, the novels? Nobody? Okay. Oh, one person. Thank you. All right. I love Sherlock Holmes. And I got the idea when I was reading one of the stories when his colleague, Dr. Watson, asked him the question, Sherlock, what's the difference between you and Lestrade? And Lestrade works for Scotland Yard. He was the one who would come in and try to solve the crime and ultimately was wrong. Sherlock took a different approach. And what Sherlock called Lestrade's approach was backward thinking. In other words, Lestrade would come in, see what he saw, make a conclusion, and then he would try to validate that conclusion, justify that conclusion. And we've all done it. Let me give you an example. Have you ever walked into a clothing store, not really expecting you were going to buy something, and you see this gorgeous jacket, right? And you say to yourself, I got to get it. You've already made the conclusion. Now you start to think of all the reasons. I'm going to give a talk at ICCE, the national, and I could use that jacket. It's going to be cold when I'm in Tokyo. I need a jacket. Right? This jacket will match the pants I have. So you start to think of all those reasons. All right? It justifies the purchase. You buy the jacket. You're shaking your head. You've done this many times. You get it home, and what generally happens? It just wasn't the jacket you really needed, right? And if you're a man, you probably stick it in your closet, hope to never see it again. If you're a woman, you're probably smarter. You take it back, you exchange it for something you really do need. That's backward thinking. So the next time as a coach, you find yourself thinking backwards, trying to justify your decisions, make that a little bell going off in your head thinking this is not the right decision. What Sherlock does and what great coaches do is forward decision making because it's oriented towards solving a problem. And there's been research that we've done, and it's also been done at the University of Pittsburgh, the Center of Cognitive Development. And this is what they found. The first step for expert decision makers is that they clearly define the problem. In fact, the experts will spend more time than novices trying to define the problem. And here's why. Because if you don't have the problem right, you will never get the solution right. And I'll give you an example from something that occurred when we were studying batting instructors in Major League Baseball in the United States. We were studying 3 batting instructors. Well, we had the opportunity to be with the teams, and I watched one manager who was a very successful manager. Because of the protocol in the studies, I can't tell you the teams we studied or the people we studied. But this one team we were on that later actually won the World Series that year had a rookie who made the team in spring training, made the team very early, and he was playing phenomenally. He was batting like .350 in the months of April and May. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of May, his batting started to slip. So by mid-June, not .350, he was about .300. By the end of June, he was .250. By the beginning of July, he was .200. Now, most managers would probably send that rookie down to minor league baseball. Now, the manager didn't communicate with this player very well because the player spoke no English, he spoke Spanish. He was a Latino player. And the manager was an American player, so the communication just wasn't good. But this manager wanted to know, he was smart enough to say, what is the problem with this player? So he asked one of the senior players, who had been on the team for a number of years and had a good relationship with the manager, would you please talk to the player and find out what really is bothering him? Well, that senior player came back 2 days later and said the player had his girlfriend come up from their home country in May, and she got sick. She got very sick, and she's getting worse, and he thinks she's going to die. And so the manager says, why don't they go to the hospital? He said they tried to go to the hospital, but they couldn't find anybody who spoke Spanish. So they haven't been to a doctor. So what does the manager do? He doesn't send the rookie down to minor league baseball. He calls the front office and says, I want a Spanish translator to take this player and his girlfriend to the hospital today. All right. They went. What they found out is that she had a virus, that she was prescribed antibiotics, and she started to get better. And guess what happened to that baseball player's batting average? It started to go higher, and he won the Rookie of the Year league. All right. Now, that's because the manager took the time to define the problem. Next, once you have the problem, you have to recognize the factors that are causing the problem. If you have the problem right, that step isn't too difficult. The next step is identify possible solutions. Notice that word is solutions. People who are poor decision makers will come up with one solution, and that's the one they'll try. Good decision makers will say, okay, that's a possibility, but let's think about it a little differently. What would be plan B? What would be plan C? Maybe you discover if we combine plan C and plan A, that's even a better solution. So they think of multiple solutions before they actually implement any solution. And then the final step is they implement it, and then they evaluate it. Because if it doesn't meet standards, they'll change it. Poor decision makers implement the solution, and then they fight with all their pride to hold on to it. They're invested in it because that's their solution. Great coaches don't do that. They're willing to change. They're willing to change quickly if they see a reason to do that. That's how they solve the problems. To find a solution, find the problems that are causing it, identify solutions, And then finally, implement and evaluate the problem. All right. I want to talk about how they communicate. We found this to be critical factors in the differentiators between great coaches and good coaches. All right. This coach that you see here wearing the red jacket, his name's Jack Bowerly. Jack was the United States women's Olympic swim coach in the Beijing Games in 2008. Jack has actually coached in 5 Olympics. Jack has personally trained athletes that competed in Rio de Janeiro. Now, if Jack Bowerly was a country and his athletes were the athletes of that country, Jack would have placed 24th in the medal rounds of the Olympic Games. Jack's athletes won more medals in the Rio Games than Switzerland did in all sports. That's, to my mind, definition of greatness in coaching. This photo was taken in Taiwan. Jack and I do some work over there. I do the mental training for some of the athletes, and Jack does the technique. But Jack's a very smart coach. If you notice on the left side of that slide, there's a woman who is one of Jack's former swimmers. That's Carolyn Joyce. Carolyn has competed in 2 Olympics and won 4 silver medals. And so when Jack has to explain technique, he stands on the pool deck, Carolyn gets in the water and shows him how to do it. I don't think Jack even owns a bathing suit. But he knows how to coach. And one thing that is important to know here is Jack isn't great at understanding physiology or fitness principles. Sometimes he doesn't use technology. Very seldom does he use a video camera. Haley, we were talking about this last night. But what he does is he's better at anybody in establishing relationships with his athletes. And I remember the morning we had this conversation. He has what we call relationship behaviors. The first and foremost is eye contact. Jack will look you square in the eye when he's talking to you. And if he's looking to somebody else, he'll look them square in the eye. That forms a bond. Next, he asks personal questions. Now, personal, yes. Intimate or embarrassing, no. I remember the conversation here. So, what subjects do you like? These were schoolboys, high school. What subjects do you like in school? Do you have any siblings, brothers, sisters? Oh, how many? What do they like to do? Are they swimmers too? No, your sister likes to play the violin. That's interesting. How about your parents? What's your dad do? What's your mom do? And so he gets to know the athletes. And then he doesn't, it's not a one-way conversation. He will reveal personal information about himself. You like baseball? I love baseball. Philadelphia Phillies are my favorite team. Right? I love to surf. That's what I do at the beach. Right? What do you like to do at the beach? And so they get to know each other as people. Now here's the power in that. The power it gives Jack is that when that athlete steps onto the starting block at the Olympic finals, Jack knows exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to say it to that athlete because he knows that athlete so well. And that athlete, because Jack's established that relationship, to follow up with what Dr. Pym said, the trust bond is there. So when Jack says, "You've got this," they believe it. And it has to do, don't underestimate it. It has to do with his ability to communicate that I care for you. There's an old saying in sport, and it's very true. Athletes do not care how much you know as a coach until they know how much you care. And Jack Bowerly cares a great deal. Also in communication, right? It was interesting when we were supposed to ask characteristics of ourselves. I asked John Bales what some of his strengths were, and he identified this one, didn't you, John? Listening, yeah. That's Phil Jackson talking to Kobe Bryant. It's what I call the silent skill, but it's a skill that is so powerful. It's silent because we don't know if somebody's actually listening to us. Right? People who are good at it will do this. They'll ask questions, like Jack does, and then they'll listen to what you say. Right? Not just that, but they'll listen for your thoughts. They'll listen for your feelings. They'll listen to your comprehension. And this is really important when you're trying to give athletes information that will improve their performance, because they may not have understood it in the way you wanted to communicate it. And until you can listen to the athlete, you really don't know what they're thinking. Great coaches will ask questions all the time. And questions meaning that they really want sincere answers. And this is how they respond to it. They will accept what the athlete says. They don't judge. Now, eventually, they may offer something like, well, I can understand why you say that. Can I offer you an alternative opinion for you to consider? Now we're having a conversation. Because ultimately, whose opinion is most important? The answer is the athlete, because they're the one who's on the starting line. They're the one that has to take the ball and put it in the net. They're the one that has to perform when the pressure's on. And so their opinion actually becomes the more important. All right. Give the speaker, the athlete, full attention when he or she is talking to you. Now here's a finding that shocked us when we were studying the communication of great coaches. Great coaches want the athlete to take ownership of the information. We studied beginning coaches, competent coaches or good coaches, and then we studied great coaches. And in terms of their intentions to communicate or evaluating their communication, here's what we found. Beginners, and think of yourself as a beginner, they were most concerned that I was clear. Did people understand what I was saying? Did I explain it thoroughly? That was a beginner. Competent coach in communicating wanted to make sure the athlete, they weren't as concerned about their clarity or thoroughness. They were concerned, did the athlete get the information? Did the athlete understand what I told him or her? So they might ask a question. They might say, for example, Penny, can you tell me what I just told you? And that would tell me if she understood what I said. That's a good coach. Here's the great coach. They want the athlete to take ownership of the information. And let me give you an example how I first experienced this. It was even before we did the study. I do a lot of work in the golf industry, and at one time I was out on the golf course with a very well-known golf instructor, Laird Smald. I don't know, Glenn, do you know Laird? Yeah. Laird teaches at the Pebble Beach Golf Academy and was the PGA Teacher of the Year one year. And Laird and I were playing, phenomenal golfer, Laird, Duffer, Paul. All right? And so I said to Laird, I'm having some problems, Laird. I'm not sure what I'm doing in my swing. And he says, well, what's the problem? Question, what's the problem? I said, I really don't know. It doesn't feel right. He goes, where doesn't it feel right? I don't know. It just doesn't feel right, Laird. He says, well, take a swing and tell me if your shoulders and arms feel okay. Yeah, they feel all right. He says, how about your lower body? Does that feel all right? And I felt it immediately. And I said, no, I'm going back too far. That's why I can't get my weight forward. And he said, all right, so that's the problem. What are you going to do about it? And I had to think about it for a while. And so I turned to him and I said, what would you suggest I do about it? He goes, well, if I had that problem, I would try to put more weight on the inside of my heel. That keeps me from swaying. You want to try that? Works for me. Yeah, I'll try that. All right. Now, what happened there? He could have simply said, Paul, on your backswing, put more weight on your heel. That's what a good instructor did. But first of all, who solved the problem? Me, the player, did. I found out where my problem was. What was the solution? I ultimately found the solution. I had to ask a resource for it, but I came up with it. Because here's the difference. Great coaches, when it comes to the final minute of a game, final seconds of a game, and your basketball player is on the foul line, do you really want him or her to be thinking, gee, what did the coach say I should do? No. You want them to feel that they know what to do and they know how to do it because they've discovered it. They have ownership of that information. And great coaches make sure that their players understand what they're supposed to do from the player's perspective. They own that information. Pretty good volleyball player, yes? All right. Want to finish with self-monitoring. Great coaches are very self-critical of what they do. Does that mean that they're constantly down on themselves? No, not at all. Here's what it means. First of all, they know what problems are going to be most challenging for them. They recognize no matter how many championships I've won in the past, it doesn't mean I'm going to win one today. No matter how successful we were last season, it doesn't guarantee our success this year. What's going to be my biggest challenge this year? And that's what they look for, and they can predict that. The next, they're very aware of their errors. They're not perfect, and they don't try to be. But they try to understand what they do well and what they don't do well. And when they do make an error, they understand why it led to failure. And I would guess everyone in here, you have learned more from your failures in life than you have in your successes in life, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. You learn from your failures. And the great ones are not afraid to say, I failed. What they don't want to do is fail tomorrow, so they have to understand why they failed. And they take responsibility for it. If you're ever working with a coach and an athlete's not successful, and they start blaming the athlete, this athlete's just not motivated, this athlete's not talented, this athlete doesn't work hard enough. You know what? I had that athlete's brother last year, and he was just as lazy and had no talent either. We don't have the right equipment, we don't have the right facilities. That's a coach who will never be great. Because when you take responsibility for the athlete, you try everything in your power as a coach to make that athlete, to make that team successful. There was a time that I was spending with what I considered a great golf coach in the United States, and there was a program where anybody could come in free for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, and get a free golf lesson. And his name's Craig. Craig gave the golf lesson to this woman who came in to see him. She came in to see him because her husband had just retired, and they had moved to Florida. That happens in the United States. And he loved golf. And so she wanted to learn to play golf so she could play golf with him in retirement. So she heard Craig was good, and it was a free lesson, so she came in. And so Craig gave her the lesson, and I thought he did remarkably well. Afterwards, we went out to dinner that night, and Craig is normally a very vivacious guy, fun to be with, especially if you give him a Guinness or two. But that night, he was just very quiet. And I said, Craig, what's the problem? And he said, you know that woman that came in this afternoon? I said, the one from New York? And he says, yeah. He said, I could have done better. I said, Craig, you're the PGA Teacher of the Year. You could have done better. And he says, yes, I could have done better. Wait a minute, Craig. You only saw her for 10 minutes. An average lesson is at least 30, right, Glenn? Yeah, 30, sometimes 15 minutes. You only saw her for 10 minutes. You will never see her again, and she didn't pay you a dime for your time, and you could have done better. And he says, yeah, I could have done better. And that's why Craig Shanklin is a great coach, because he could have done better. And that's how they think. They always want to improve. And they don't care how many awards you give them or stroke their ego. That's not what they're about. They want their athletes to be successful. And so if there's failure with the athlete, they look first to themselves. And the day as a coach you start doing that is the day you're going to discover remarkable ways to make those athletes successful. All right. So they recognize their knowledge limits, what they don't know. And I'm guessing that's why some of you are here today, to try to learn some things you didn't know. And you're aware of the adequacy of your solutions. They're always looking to try to change what they do to get better. Yes, we're good as we are, but we've got to find a way to be even better than we are today. That's what great coaches do. Now, this last one I got from a wonderful coach and also a good friend. Her name is Pia Nilsson. She's originally from Sweden, but she coached what I consider one of the greatest female golfers of all time. Her name's Annika Sorenstam. And Annika, after every tournament, Annika's the athlete, Pia's the coach, after every tournament would sit down and write out, no matter how well Annika played, and Annika won many tournaments, write out the answers to these three questions. The first question is, what did I do well? because it's important to know what your strengths are. After a practice or after a game, as a coach, if you said to yourself, what did I do well today as a coach? I will guarantee you this, after this presentation, I am going to ask myself, what did I do well today? What went fairly well? Because if I give another presentation, I want to be able to use those strengths and build on that. Second question, what could improve? What could be better? Not necessarily what was bad. It's improvement oriented. It's not looking to beat yourself up. It's looking to discover ways to get better at what you do. So you have to identify it and do it today. At the end of this game, what could I have done better as a coach? At the end of this practice, what could I have done better as a coach? And then the final question is probably obvious. How do I make it better? Do I need more practice? Do I need to go read? Do I need to sit in a seminar? Maybe I need to talk to another coach. And that's the strategy that will make you better. After every game, after every practice as a coach, if you ask yourself those three questions, those three simple questions, you will discover ways to be great. And the great coaches do that. They're always looking for ways to be better tomorrow than they are today. Time now for a little action on your part. Coaches in here, I want you to answer this question. Those of you that are in coach developers, I want you to think of a coach that you're currently working with or have worked that could improve this. All right, we covered 5 things. You tell me what you could be good at. Is there something in your personality, for example, be a little more extroverted or be a little less neurotic, that might help you to be a better coach? Or analytic skills. Do you need to start looking at your athletes or your teams in ways that ask the 3 questions? What do I need to change that's under my control that will influence results? All right, maybe your analytical skills are okay, so you might want to work on decision making. Maybe I need to be better at defining the problem and not jumping to solutions so quickly. I have to stop thinking backward and be more proactive or forward thinking. Maybe it's my communication. Maybe I need to start getting athletes to buy ownership of the knowledge that's going to help them. Or maybe I need more relationship behaviors. Look in the eye, ask more personal questions, share more personal information, or self-monitor. Do I need to ask those 3 questions? What I'd like you to do is just pick one of those, and then if you would, with one other person or 2 other people, what will you do to be a better coach? Or if you're working with coaches, what would you recommend they do to be a better coach? Go ahead, I'll just give you a couple minutes. And you don't need to be quiet, this room is fine. By the way, why do I say just pick one? If you work on too many things, nothing will get better. Pick one and get really good at it. All right, I'd like to close by first thanking you for coming today. I'm honored by your presence. There's many things many of you could have been doing other than being here, and so for me it was a privilege to be able to share something that I've enjoyed doing over the last 30 years with you, with the sincere hope that at least something I said today will help make you a better coach or help you to prepare coaches to a higher level of standard. And then I'm often asked, because I do study many, many coaches in many sports at the elite level, what's been my favorite interview or what's been my favorite coach? And it was Dean Smith, the person on the right, who was a university coach, the University of North Carolina. Great coach. He was Michael Jordan, who's the gentleman on the left. Michael Jordan's coach while Michael was in college. And I do remember Dean telling me that we were talking about MJ, as he called him. And he said, you know, Michael was never as good as he thought he was. And I said, Coach, most people consider Michael Jordan to be the greatest basketball player of all time. He shook his head and he said, he still wasn't as great as he thought he was. So, but then we talked about other topics than MJ, and he told me this. He said, the most important thing in good leadership is truly caring. I was a demanding coach, but my players knew that I cared for them. And every great coach that I've ever had the privilege to meet, I think echoes that philosophy and embraces that belief. And I hope you do as well. Thank you for your time.